では今からですね、キュレーターのロイシーンさんにこちらのモリスギャラリーを案内してもらいたいと思います。
Come follow me, please. So this room tries to explain who William Morris is. So we have, of course, the portrait of Morris. So we know what he looks like. He's in his early 30s. Early 30s, so quite young.
若いですね。
Yeah, 若い. And you can see here, he still looks like a Victorian gentleman. You know, he's wearing the dark suit. He looks quite sort of respectable. When he gets older, he stops wearing these clothes. He wears a smock, he wears artist clothes instead. But here he looks kind of like a
black suits.
And so this room introduces some of the things that he does. So of course we have stained glass. We have embroidery. We have writing, but also book design and printing. We have over here socialism, which was a very important part. And so, you know, his socialist, his political beliefs.
社会主義ですね。
We have printed textiles. We have
これオリジナルone?
Original.
これオリジナルのすごく有名ですね。This is a famous design.
It's a very famous design, yeah. It's part of his River series designs. We have an original design drawing to show his drawing skills.
Drawing, this is drawing.
Original drawing,
モリ
exactly.
スさんが実際に描いたものですね。They're watercolors.
Yes, exactly, a pencil watercolor. And I love this because you can see the design process. You know, you can see the shadow and where he's
この
thinking.
プロセスがこれでわかるんですね。はい。
And carpets, of course. So, and wallpaper. This room is like a snapshot, you know, just every little thing to help introduce people to everything that he did in his whole life. So, this gallery tries to explain how Morris, you know, as I said, a normal man from a normal middle-class family becomes William Morris, the designer, artist, poet. And so, when he's living in this house, when he goes to university, he goes to Oxford. And when he's in Oxford, he meets a group of people who are very influential. So he meets Edward Burne-Jones, who is his friend at Oxford, who becomes a painter. Dante Gabriel Rossetti, who's already a painter and who influences him. And so Edward Burne-Jones and William Morris they love Rossetti and they want to be like painters like Rossetti.
There are many artists.
Many artists, exactly. And so they're also really interested in medieval history. So Rossetti is part of a group called the Pre-Raphaelite group, and they wanted to take art back to a time before the Renaissance painter Raphael, so medieval time. And so we have here these objects that start to show Morris's interest in medieval history. And when they're in Oxford, they get a commission to paint some of the walls in the Oxford Union building. And in order to do so, they have the sword and the helmet made so that they can accurately depict and represent medieval history. So you can see, even when he's very young, he loves medieval history, but he also wants to get the details right. He wants to be accurate. You know, he wants to really understand and be accurate. Exactly. So these are very early objects from the 1850s, before he's famous, before he's an artist, before he's a designer, when he's just a young man who's trying to figure out what he wants to do. You know, and he is very, very young.
Very young. 最初はこういうデザインに影響されたというね、珍しいですね。日本人はあまり知られてないですね。
And so he travels to France. I said he's inspired by the cathedrals in France. He's inspired by the writings of John Ruskin, who is also a thinker and interested in medieval. And also at Oxford, he meets his future wife, Jane. So he meets Jane, and he has this kind of romantic idea about romantic medieval love, chivalric love. And this is a very rare drawing by William Morris of a portrait. Because Morris doesn't draw portraits, he does patterns, right? But this shows his wife, Jane. But I always think what he's really good at is the drawing of the dress and the pattern and the interest. And so he's clearly really interested, again, very young, about pattern and medieval aesthetic, and he kind of draws Jane as this medieval woman. You know,
he's good at painting.
Yes, he's very good at drawing. Yeah, absolutely. And then Jane and William get married, and their friend Philip Webb designs them a house. This is
yeah.
Red House.
Yeah, the
have
house.
you been
Very
there?
famous
Very
house.
famous. Red House, very famous house.
Mhm.
But when they move in, they realize they don't like any furniture that they can buy in the shops. They don't like it. So they decide to make their own. So there are examples here of very early furniture. So this is a very, it looks very uncomfortable, early chair by Morris. But you can
This is the original one?
Original, yes, everything is original.
Okay.
Everything is
Nice,
original.
nice.
And it looks very medieval, it's very heavy, it's very old-fashioned.
Yeah.
And they also start doing these kind of very medieval inspired embroideries. But again, they're still learning, they're still practicing.
Yeah,
you know, he
yeah.
hasn't found his voice yet. So they're kind of playing, I guess, with the medieval idea.
This is, I think, this is oak one.
Yeah, it's oak. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
And painted
Painting.
furniture. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Painting してるんですね、オークに直接。珍しいですね、it's rare.
Yeah. It's not typical Morris, right? Yeah, exactly. But it's early, it's new.
Yeah.
An amazing thing to come from Red House is this wallpaper design. So again, this is an original design drawing. And this is the first wallpaper that William Morris designs.
This is a very famous design.
Very famous design. It's one of my favorites.
皆さん知ってるデザインですね、これはね。これはオリジナルです。
And you can see here the design to the pattern, and what often happens is that Morris does the flowers and his friends do the other things. So his friend Philip Webb draws the birds. So it's a collaboration. Collaboration. And
with
Morris and Philip Webb.
Philip.
And sometimes he collaborates with Edward Burne-Jones, sometimes with Philip Webb. So it's always, it's like a group of friends, I guess, kind of collaborating, working together.
なるほど。each other
influence each other, exactly. So it's very collaborative.
これが大事ですね。やっぱりコラボレーションして自分だけじゃなくて、こう自然をミックスした。Okay, thank you. This name is
Trellis.
これね、これとても有名な最初のデザインだそうです。
Yes, exactly. And trellis means it's the wooden things that the roses grow on. Exactly, it's called trellis. So they set up a shop called Morris, Marshall, Faulkner and Co. And inside the shop, they start designing everything. So they do wallpaper, they do textiles, they do stained glass. This display I really like because it shows the difference between Morris and like traditional Victorian design.
In the Victorian, Morris designed this chair.
Yes, exactly.
And this is a classical design, balloon back chair.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's difficult sometimes for visitors to understand why Morris is different because he's Victorian, people think he's old-fashioned, they associate it with history. So we wanted to show how radical, how new, how different. So this is kind of traditional Victorian design, very naturalistic wallpaper, very detailed, very English, exactly, very English, very.
左の方はもうトラディショナルなウォールペーパーですね。で、トラディショナルなクラシカルデザイン。
Exactly. Yeah. Morris did something different. And so very different. So for example, you can see the willow. It's not naturalistic. It's very flat. It's very abstracted. But it looks to me more alive. To me, this doesn't look like it's alive. It looks a bit dead. You know, it looks static. Whereas this has movement. It flows and it's movement.
Living,
looks like living.
Nature.
Exactly.
Feel.
Exactly. And the chair, again, you can see the difference. It's so simple. Very simple, very humble, very folk-craft-like. You can see how it's made, you can see the materials, and it's just very plain relative to this.
This chair is a Sussex chair?
Sussex chair, exactly.
これは Sussex chair っていうのはですね、とっても有名なチェアなんですけども、これはサウスイングランド。in the South England で、南イングランドの方でね、作ったんですけれどもね、これはオリジナルなんですよ。
And so these are some of the other things that they start designing. So again, it's a Sussex chair, but a big one.
これね、three people for the three people.
Exactly.
Sussex chair で。これは、この what kind of material this one?
Oh, it's rush. Yeah, exactly.
They're comfortable, I think.
They're okay. They're okay. This is more comfortable.
More comfortable.
And so they start doing printed textiles, like this one and this one. They do more elaborate furniture. They design wallpaper. So these are two textile and wallpaper designs, and they start becoming successful and famous.
Morris introduced the design in the room and also the chair and the wallpaper. Also, the Morris introduced the nature.
Exactly. It's all about having nature inside. Yeah, but helping people remember nature and about having natural world inside your life, inside your home. Then these are some examples of interior decoration and stained glass. So you can tell it's for stained glass because there's always these thick black lines, and the lines are for the leads. You know, you can see.
あそこで見ていただいたらわかるんですけど、ああいうふうにステンドグラスになる前のデザインがですね、これはですね、オリジナルのですね。
Yeah, exactly. So these are the shapes for the glass to be cut out. And so Edward Burne-Jones becomes the most successful designer for Morris & Co. for stained glass. And this scene shows a scene from the Bible when the wise men go to see the baby Jesus when he's born. So it's a very popular scene. This is my favorite gallery.
Nice gallery.
And I like this gallery because it talks about process.
Process. こちらはプロセス、過程を見せるギャラリーです。
So Morris is not just a designer, he's also a craftsman. So he knows how to make things. And he thinks it's very important that if you're designing something, you also know how to make it.
これは大事なことですね。作り方。過程が知らなければいけないとデザイナーとして両方知るようになる。Both is important.
Yeah, exactly. And they need to work together. Design and manufacture works together.
Design, manufacture, both is important.
Exactly.
He knows the both.
Exactly. So when he's designing, he thinks about the process. And so, for example, with his wallpaper and his textiles, he uses woodblock printing.
Woodblock painting.
So up there, you see the woodblock printing.
これがオリジナルのウッドブロックっていうのはこれですね。木版画ですね。日本語で言うと木版画のペインティングを施したんですね。これがオリジナルの木版画ですね。
And he designs these designs, and they're very complicated. And so for each pattern, you need about 25 wood blocks in order to create one little bit of pattern. And so you take the wood blocks and you go over again and again and again, 25 times to find the best pattern. But it's the advantage of doing this is that the patterns are very textured and layered and very beautiful. But the downside is that they're very expensive. So it's difficult for Morris because he is trying to create beautiful things for everybody. But because of his working processes, his products end up being quite expensive. Another really nice thing in here is the textiles.
こちらテクスタイルですね。
So here these two are lovely, and you can see it's indigo, it's aizome.
Also very famous.
Very famous. Ichigo Dorobo, Strawberry seed.
Strawberry seed.
Exactly. And you can see here, he is using aizome, indigo dyeing, which is unusual for this time. So in the Victorian era, natural dyes are being not used anymore, and they use synthetic dyes instead. However, Morris, he likes history, he likes tradition, but he also likes the quality of historic dyes. So he uses indigo. And this one and this one, you can see they're made from, it's called the indigo discharge process. And to do this, you dye the entire fabric indigo, the whole thing indigo. And you can tell because the side is indigo. See, this one is not, but this one is.
ここですね。このサイドがインディゴのこの色ですね。まさにこっちはないですね。
Exactly. So you dye the whole thing indigo. Then you take where you want the pattern and you use bleach or some kind of bleaching agent to block print the pattern so it's now white. And then you do the printing again with color. So you do it again. Exactly. So indigo, then bleach, then color. It's expensive. It's time consuming. It takes a long time.
お金がかかりますよね。インディゴをまず塗ってからそこからパターン入れるんでとってもいいけど、very expensive.
Very expensive. But the result is very beautiful. So it's about the balance.
結局はとてもいいものができたということですね。すごいですね。tiles.
The tiles, the ceramics. So Morris does produce some tiles, but they're never very successful. So later on, he works with someone called William de Morgan, who is a very successful, famous ceramicist. And so most of the tiles are a collaboration between de Morgan and Morris. And you see de Morgan is really interested in glazing and in pattern, but in the color. And he uses a technique called lusterware, which is when you put metal powder inside the glaze, and then the metal melts in the glaze and shines.
これがとてもいい色で発色が出てますね。メタルパウダーを使っているということですね。Thank you.
And then this gallery helps you understand about Morris's shop. So Morris's business is successful. They have a lot of clients, and so they set up a shop in Oxford Street in London, which is still a fashionable shopping area, but then it was a fashionable shopping area near Liberty, etc. And this room shows you all the different sorts of things you could buy in Morris's shop.
モリスショップで売っていたものですっていうことですね。
So, for example, you can buy wallpaper and fabric.
Nowadays we have this kind of
sample. Exactly, sample work.
これは当時のですね、サンプルデザインですよね。これを見ながら、the customer choice.
Exactly, yes. And of course, furniture and ceramics.
セラミックスもね、これすべてですね、セラミック、
ceramics and furniture, paintings,
painting, also painting,
embroidery, metalwork,
Metalwork.
furniture. There's everything. So you can go to Morris's shop and you can buy your whole interior design. So it's this idea of kind of total design where the whole interior works together in harmony.
Morris is kind of a businessman.
He's a businessman. He is a good business. I mean, he's a good businessman. Exactly. So he's not only a designer, but he's also a businessman. Yeah.
まあだからこそビジネスマンだったからこそモリス自身が有名になったのもありますよね。たくさん世界中にこのデザインがいってですね。This is interesting.
In the main gallery downstairs, there's a temporary exhibition.
Okay.
So this room explains about Morris's love of books. So Morris did different things throughout his life. You know, he basically started off thinking about wallpaper and textiles and furniture and stained glass. And then towards the end of his life, he becomes really interested in books. And not just writing books. I mean, Morris writes books, he writes poems, but also about the design of books, about what books look like, about the physical objects. So he designs different typefaces, which are inspired by medieval forms, but are much more readable, much more legible, much more simple. But obviously they have this kind of medieval aesthetic. He thinks about the printing, about the ink. He thinks about the type of paper. He thinks about the graphic design. You know, he thinks about the book as a total object. And he and Edward Burne-Jones collaborate again a lot on these. So this one here is a reproduction of the Chaucer, which is one of his kind of his final great things. But you can see Edward Burne-Jones does the painting or the drawing, the illustration, and then Morris designs the pattern.
This pattern looks like a
very Morris. And then Morris also designs the font. So it's a collaboration, and it's Morris's great love. He loves books. When he has money, he always just buys books, you know. So it's something that he's really passionate about, and this is towards the end of his life, his biggest project.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so they set up a printing press on the banks of the River Thames in West London. And Kelmscott House is Morris's house. And so they call it the Kelmscott Press after that, basically. But these are some of the great books that he does. And you can see, you know, again, we started with the medieval and we're ending with the medieval as well. You know, he's again interested by all the medieval design and printing. Yeah. So this room is about Morris's socialist beliefs and socialism. So he was increasingly political as he got older. And he spent a lot of time visiting places around the country, lecturing, talking, protesting, helping people who were on strike and, you know, and workers, and trying to help workers understand about their rights and about the importance of art and design in their lives. This is his satchel, his bag, and he would carry his socialist papers and you imagine give them out to everybody. Exactly.
Upper class も working class も same
exactly.
っていうことを同じ人だということを訴えるということで、こちらの運動に浸透していったので、この部屋がですね、そういうファイティングがこうという部屋になっていますね。
Exactly. So his cause was socialism. Exactly. And so his socialism takes three things really. One is about workers' rights, and two is about protecting the environment. So the painting up here, this is not by Morris, it's by someone else, but it shows the environment in this area. And Morris was very important in helping people realize you should protect the environment and saving the forest so that it's not destroyed, it's not built over, that people respect the environment. So that's something else, that's another cause he fights for. And then the third thing he fights for is about historic buildings. So in England at this time, there was no protection for historic buildings at all. If you owned a building, you could do anything you wanted. You could knock it down. So Morris thought that buildings belonged to everybody, that history belonged to everybody. And so he campaigned with Philip Webb, his friend, to set up a foundation called the Society for Protection for Ancient Buildings, which is the first group anywhere in the world that campaigns to save buildings and educate people about historic buildings. And the society is still going today, and it's the foundation of things like National Trust and English Heritage. So this is before National Trust, before English Heritage, before there's any legal protection for buildings. It's the first time that people are really organized about saving historic buildings for the future.
はい、今日はですね、ロイシーンさんにモリスギャラリーの案内をしていただきました。そしてですね、今日日本の皆さんにもたくさんの情報をいただきました。
はい、ありがとうございます。
最後にこちらの博物館と、あとは日本の皆さんにもう一度メッセージをいただけますか？お願いします。
We would love to welcome you here at the William Morris Gallery, so please do come next time you're in London.
Thank you so much.
ありがとうございました。
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.